I analyzed every Unstable SMP player and you won't believe what I found. From the strongest fighters to secret villains who nearly destroyed the server, I'm breaking down every character all to answer the question, who is the strongest player on Unstable SMP? If you ask most people, they'll immediately say Marlo. She's ranked number 1 on the MCTS PvP rankings. She dethroned It's Real Me, who was the previous number 1. She guards the Mafia tomb and kills literally everyone who tries to enter it. The answer seems obvious, right? But what if I told you she's not even close to being the strongest? So here's my theory, and I believe there's a strong chance this is gonna blow your mind. The strongest player on Unstable SMP isn't Marlo. It isn't It's Real Me. It isn't even True Original with his reality warping admin powers. But before I tell you who the actual strongest player is, consider subscribing and dropping a like on the video if you enjoy. Now, let me explain why this makes perfect sense when you really think about what strength means on this server. First, let's talk about the obvious candidates and why they are not actually the strongest. Marlo is number 1 in PvP rankings worldwide. She has mastered every form of combat, sword, mace, crystal, everything. She's better at Elytra mace combat than even Wemmbu, and that's saying something. She has this insane blindness teleportation ability where everyone goes blind when she arrives. And when the blindness fades, she's just standing there ready to kill you. The heartbeat audio speeds up before she appears. She's absolutely terrifying. And crossing paths with her is basically a death wish. But here's the thing, Marlo has been defeated before. Not in direct combat, sure, but she can be escaped from. Parrot, Coin Monkey, and Teal managed to flee from her. She followed them to the end station and killed everyone there. But the fact that they got away at all shows she's not invincible. She's the best fighter, absolutely, but strongest overall, that's a different question. Now let's look at It's Real Me. The guy is ranked number 2 in the entire world, formerly number 1 before Marlo dethroned him. He mastered mace combat, sword combat, crystal PvP. He can handle literally any situation thrown at him. He reached elite tier without needing special abilities. No gimmicks, no supernatural powers, just the zone. But again, It's Real Me is limited to combat situations. Put him in a strategic scenario where fighting isn't the answer and his strength diminishes significantly. He's incredibly dangerous in a 1v1 or even 1v100. But can he control an entire server? Can he manipulate thousands of players into doing his bidding? Not really. Then there's True Original, and honestly this is where it gets interesting. The guy has light speed movement, terrain manipulation, inventory wiping, player teleportation, cloning, disguise abilities, time manipulation, enhanced projectiles, and so much more. He can clear your inventory instantly, shoot you with super arrows from unlimited range, duplicate himself, and teleport away from any attack. He's basically a god in terms of raw abilities. But here's the crazy part. True Original died. He was killed by Parrot and Newfully using an invisible optical strike cannon. It was something nobody could have survived except one person, and that person was the director. The attack worked because it was invisible, so True Original couldn't teleport away. Despite all his powers, he was vulnerable to creative strategy. Someone outsmarted him, and that's the key to understanding true strength on the server. Now let's talk about the director, and this is where everything comes together. The director is described as potentially the most intelligent player on the entire server. The guy can calculate every action and consequence from miles away. He can counter any attack before it happens. He cannot be tricked or deceived. He knows everyone's weaknesses. He has perfect strategic prediction. Think about what that actually means. The director doesn't need to be the best PvPer because he's already predicted what you're gonna do and countered it before you even start. Marlo can teleport to you and kill you? The director already knew you were coming and set up a trap. It's Real Me is gonna 1v1 you with perfect technique? The director bribed him before the fight even started or threatened someone he cares about. True Original is gonna use reality manipulation? The director put him into an illusion first or manipulated someone he trusts to betray him. The director's resources are listed as endless or infinite, not because he's the richest in terms of material stored in chests, but because he can acquire anything needed for his plans. He literally writes his own story according to the profile. He uses information as power. Let's look at his confirmed abilities. He can put players into illusions, that's mind control or perception manipulation. He controls outcomes through perfect prediction. His information gathering and analysis capabilities are unmatched. The guy shaped major server events just by thinking ahead of everyone else. I also want to add that the director is a Harvard student in real life, which just makes it so much better. Now you might be thinking, wait, didn't the director lose? Doesn't that disqualify him from being the strongest? Great question. Yes, the director was defeated, but here's the thing, he lost because the closest person to him turned out to be his greatest weakness. Someone he trusted or cared about betrayed him or was used against him. Think about that for a second. The only way to defeat the director wasn't through combat, wasn't through exploits, wasn't through admin powers. It was through exploiting his emotional attachment to someone. That's actually insane when you think about it. The fact that the only weakness they could find was getting to someone he cared about means everything else about him was basically unbeatable. Despite this single downfall, he was powerful enough to control other top players. He could get anyone to work with him beyond just threatening them. He wielded enormous influence over server politics. His mind alone guaranteed victory in virtually every scenario except the one time someone exploited his emotions. Let me put this in perspective. Marlow can kill you in a 1v1. The director prevents the 1v1 from ever happening by manipulating the circumstances so you never even get close to him. Its real me can beat you in any combat scenario. The director changes the scenario so combat isn't an option. True Original can warp reality. The director puts him in an illusion before he gets a chance or manipulates someone True Original trusts to sabotage him. This is what true strength looks like on Unstable SMP. It's about who shapes the narrative, who pulls the strings, who makes other players dance like puppets without them even realizing it. Look at the Invisible Mafia as a comparison. Ashswag commanded hundreds of thousands of members. He had the best players under his command. He could kill anyone, torture anyone. Nobody was safe from the Mafia. That's incredible power, but the director operated on a different level entirely. The director didn't need an army of hundreds of thousands because he could manipulate the armies that already existed. He didn't need to personally threaten anyone because he knew exactly what threats would work and who to deliver them. And here's something else that you might not have noticed. The only person who could theoretically survive the invisible orbital strike cannon that killed True Original was the director. That means the director has some form of ultimate defense that transcends even reality manipulation. Possibly through prediction, he would have known the attack was coming and moved before it fired. Now let me address the counter argument that since the director was defeated, he can't be the strongest. But here's the thing, we don't actually know if the director is truly defeated or just in hiding. What if his defeat was part of a larger plan? What if he wanted people to think he was gone so he could operate more freely? In fact, if this video gets 1,000 likes, I'll make a dedicated video on the director. The director's power philosophy is that he doesn't need special abilities or supernatural powers. His mind alone guarantees victory, and historically on servers like this, the smartest players end up controlling everything regardless of combat ability. Look at Spoke early on. He wasn't good at PvP, but his exploits and manipulation made him incredibly powerful. The director is basically Spoke taken to the absolute extreme. Think about the practical implications. If you're Marlow and you want to kill someone, you have to actually find them and fight them. If you're the director and you want someone dead, you manipulate circumstances so they walk into a trap, or you turn their allies against them, or you bribe someone else to do it, or you put them in an illusion where they think they're safe until it's too late. You have infinite options and your opponent doesn't even know you're the one orchestrating it. The director shaped major server events from the shadows. We don't even know the full extent of what he did because that's how good he was at controlling information. The fact that we are still asking questions about who he was and what his connection to Marlow was months later show his influence is still being felt. So yeah, that's my theory. The strongest player on Unstable SMP isn't the #1 ranked PvPer. It isn't the hacker, it's the director. The player who doesn't need to fight because he's already won before the fight begins. The player who controls the server through pure intelligence and strategic prediction. The player whose only weakness was caring about someone, which actually makes him more human and more dangerous at the same time. Marlow is the deadliest, its real me is the most skilled, True Original is the most powerful in terms of raw abilities, but the director is the strongest because strength on Unstable SMP isn't about who can kill the most people, it's about who controls the board, and the director controls it. I could be totally wrong about this, but based on everything we know about how power actually works on the server, I believe the director represents true strength in a way that pure combat ability never could. But in order to find the true strongest player, we have to analyze the villains, which is why
I ranked every unstable SMP villain, and you won't believe what I found. From sidekicks to masterminds who nearly destroyed the server entirely, I'm breaking down every villain and ranking them on a tier list. But before we start, consider subscribing and dropping a like, as these videos take hours of research and your support means everything. Starting at F tier, we have Foray MC. Foray is clownpierce's right-hand man, one of the guards who monopolizes the nether alongside Clown. He's got that special redstone trim armor, which marks him as one of ashswag's most trusted mafia members. Speaking of ashswag, he hired Foray to kidnap Wefis as a hostage and threatened to kill Eggchan to force Wemmbu to surrender. But here's the problem: when Wemmbu and Eggchan came back with TNT missiles and stripped him of his armor, Foray gave up his mace just to survive. A true villain fights back harder. Foray MC is just an assistant. He follows orders from more powerful villains and has no personal motivation beyond serving clownpierce. That's textbook F tier. At D tier is Boostfer, the master of ragebait. He hired Wemmbu and Eggchan to destroy entire biomes, paying them in stacks of netherite, but his whole treasure hunting operation ended up being just a front for schemes. Boostfer also manipulated FlameFrags by dangling information about Wembu's location, refusing to share unless Flame worked for him. This goes to show that he's not just a worker like Foray. Instead, he's a villain who's willing to manipulate just to get what he wants. But when his schemes backfired, when Wemmbu destroyed his base and emptied his vault, Boostfer didn't declare war. He just moved to the next money-making scheme. He's destructive but never threatens the entire server. He's content with being a nuisance rather than a nightmare, which keeps him at D tier. Coming in at C tier is Jaden Man. His entire villain arc revolves around betrayal, and he's mastered it brutally. In Season 1, Jaden led a team to destroy Wembu's civilization. He invaded with FlameFrags, forcing the civilization to fight back. Later, he and Spongs became game masters for a quest that Parrot and Wefis had to complete, showing he had influence beyond just fighting. But Season 2 is where Jaden's true villainy shines. He robbed Spongs down to 6 or 7 diamonds, until Wemmbu saved him. Then Jaden and his team threatened to kill Eggchan if Wemmbu didn't drop all of his stuff. Jaden exiled Wemmbu to the Pirate Islands. When Wemmbu came back for revenge, Jaden led him into an abandoned underground civilization filled with wardens, trapping him with mining fatigue and trying to kill him multiple times. After Wemmbu finally captured him, FlameFrags broke Jaden out. Then Jaden convinced Flame to form a team of Wembu's past enemies just to kill him in the Farlands. Chaos erupted as teammates turned on each other, and Jaden even fought FlameFrags before eventually letting him go. But here's the twist: Jaden's new civilization was destroyed by Wemmbu. Then, with help from the Invisible Knight, Jaden captured the Marine Ranger base and founded the Pirate Empire, which became the law's greatest threat. He even saved Wemmbu and Eggchan by macing law members and housed them in his base. What makes Jaden particularly villainous is how he weaponizes alliances. He doesn't just hurt people, he manipulates entire teams and switches sides strategically. However, Jaden operates on a personal level, ruining individuals rather than threatening the entire server. His villainy is intimate but limited in scope, landing him at C tier. At B tier, we have Prince Zam. Zam's villain arc started from paranoia and an obsessive need for control. In Season 1, Zam built the Zam Empire, constructing a massive wall around Spawn and claiming all land as Empire property. He chunk banned Squiddo just for having information about Spoke. He terrorized his own guards through intimidation and paid clownpierce to assassinate Parrot X2. Zam and Wemmbu started as close allies, but Zam's paranoia destroyed that. He asked Wemmbu to build a colony to guard a vault. Then the vault turned out to be empty. The whole thing was a trap to get rid of Wemmbu. When Wemmbu came back with an orbital strike cannon and destroyed the entire Zam Empire, Zam's true character was exposed. He's insecure, dramatic, desperately clinging to power he can't maintain. Later, clownpierce trapped both Zam and Wemmbu in an escape room as punishment. They were forced to work together to survive. Zam's empire fell, his paranoia consumed him, and he ended up imprisoned by lettucek before being broken out by Spoke. He's a tragic villain whose need for control destroyed everything he built. That tragedy keeps him at B tier. A tier has two villains who deserve equal recognition: clownpierce and lettucek. Clownpierce is pure ruthlessness. He monopolized the nether, controlling all its resources alongside Foray MC and Mug'em. When Prince Sam paid him to assassinate Parrot X2, Clown didn't just hunt him. He built a carnival for a fair 1v1, trapped Parrot with mining fatigue, and forced him to fight. He built Proton, an inescapable prison, trapping 7 players including Parrot, Wefis, Darapchu, Chumpahoo, Canadian, Joseko, and Reckless. scrap too. Clown enjoys the fear he creates. He killed Wembu's villagers for information. He blew up Weefee's base and destroyed the terrain around it. When Parrot tried trapping him with 30,000 TNT, Clown survived and retaliated by destroying Bat headquarters' secret meeting room. He kidnapped Branzia's leverage. He destroyed all the ominous trial vaults, making maces and heavy cores permanently scarce. The few that remain are the last on the server. Players created entire alliances just to try killing him. He's the physical embodiment of danger. During the Mafia arc, he worked as ashswag's enforcer, killing Mafia members who disobeyed. He trapped Wemmbu and Prince Sam in an escape room designed by Watto just for entertainment. lettucek is the false savior. In Season 1, Lettuce was a member of the Zam Empire, participated in destroying Wembu's civilization, joined the End civilization, worked as a miner in Capital City, and was part of multiple civilizations including Skyblock and Ice Mountain. Season 2 is where Lettuce became a true villain. After Wemmbu and FlameFrags killed 1,000 players in the 2v1000 battle, Lettuce weaponized the tragedy. He captured Wemmbu along with 4 other prisoners: Bablu, Fanst, Prince Zam, and Blurpenstein. He watched them mine and complete tasks like a warden. Then Lettuce held a server-wide meeting and announced a vote to elect a king to rule Unstable. He gave a speech about how the server needs a ruler to protect everyone. He forced the captured Wemmbu onto the stage and announced that if elected, his first act would be executing Wemmbu as a warning to all criminals. But here's the twisted part. Lettuce leads the law and is one of the only mace wielders on Unstable. He controls the bounty assassin team from the director arc. He has access to resources that don't make sense. Maces, elytra, thousands of sets of diamond gear. Where did all that come from? Lettuce vilified Wemmbu and Flame while painting himself as the victim. He's running a propaganda campaign, convincing the server that dictatorship is salvation. Players are falling for it because they're terrified. He's installing himself as a benevolent dictator and the server is letting him do it. He even held another meeting to display who's running for king, keeping everyone focused on his election. Both deserve A tier because they operate at a server-wide level. Clown through fear and combat, Lettuce through manipulation and false heroism. Next up is S tier. First up in S tier, we have ashswag. Ashswag is the puppet master. As the leader of the invisible mafia, he didn't just want power, he nearly achieved total domination. He brainwashed players into joining the mafia upon spawning, holding them hostage with a master stasis chamber. If he died, everyone in the mafia died with him, including innocent brainwashed players. Ash pretended to be poor around Spoke to gain his trust, only to betray him spectacularly. He convinced Minutech to work as a spy, then revealed Minutech's betrayal at the perfect moment to break Spoke's team apart. He destroyed the Farland civilization after taking their warriors hostage. He patched all the exploits by forcing Jamato P to reveal them. And his most villainous act, after Weefees joined the Mafia to save Parrot, ashswag killed Weefees by dropping him into the void right in front of Parrot. That single act traumatized Parrot more than anything else in the entire series. Even after defeat, Ash's influence lingers. When Spoke spared him, ashswag predicted Spoke would become an even greater villain, a prediction that's literally shaping Season 2. He represents systematic evil at the highest level. Weefees is the psychological torturer. Weefees was Parrot's best friend and closest ally through Season 1, their mutual trust remaining constant. But then he became the main antagonist of the director arc. As the director, Weefees faked his death with ashswag's help using a dog swap trick. He became an invisible player with a voice changer, hunting down his own best friend. He hired It's Real Me to kill Parrot. When that failed, he hired Mr. Cube 6. Through books, he taunted Parrot and Bat, revealing information only the director should know, like the dandelion given to Cube. When Bat falsely accused Parrot of being the director, Weefees left him a book saying it was time to meet face to face. During their meeting, fully invisible with quartz flow trim netherite, Weefees said the voice changer wasn't to protect himself, it was to protect Parrot. Because if Parrot knew who the dictator really was, he wouldn't be angry, he'd be terrified. Weefees hired True Original, a hacker, to kill Parrot. He killed Newfly with an arrow cannon. He rescued Mr. Cube 6 when Bat captured him. He sent messages telling Parrot he couldn't beat him in a story he wrote. Finally, he trapped Jumpahoo and Durapchu, forcing Parrot to guess his identity to free them. When he revealed himself as Weefees, he explained he did everything to protect Parrot. Weefees trapped Parrot in Paragon, a prison within a prison. He knew every item in Parrot's hotbar, every hunger bar he had left. He had revealed he'd been using Jumpahoo, Durapchu, and Leowook as his guards. He brought Parrot to a pressure plate trap where stepping off meant the whole place exploded. Parrot smuggled in his spyglass, dropped it on the pressure plate, and escaped. Weefees stepped off to pick up the spyglass, and the entire base exploded, killing him. The director arc dominated season 1 and shaped Parrot's entire character. Weefy's ranks in S tier because his villainy is rooted in love corrupted by fear, and the psychological damage he caused cuts deeper than any physical threat. Spokeishere is the ultimate villain. In season 1, Spoke discovered exploits and introduced them to the server. He paid Squiddo to build the wonders just to store glitched items inside them. When Wemmbu discovered this, Spoke used an orbital cannon to destroy the wonders and trapped Wemmbu in a room full of chest minecarts. Now that may all seem like nothing, but here's where it gets dark. During the mafia infiltration, Spoke, Mapic and Leo agreed not to kill innocent players, but when ashswag gave Spoke a solo mission to kill iMajestic Rose, an innocent player building a house with her little brother, Spoke did it without hesitation. He led her into a trap and killed her with dripstone. Mapic told him he sounded like ashswag, and that comparison hit hard because it was true. After defeating the mafia, ashswag told Spoke something chilling. Spoke will follow his path. Spoke will become even more cruel. Spoke will become the villain. Spoke didn't deny it. What makes Spoke the greatest villain is that he's still seen as a protagonist by many. When he finally turns completely, the server won't see it coming. He has the skill, the mindset, and the lack of morality required to surpass even ashswag. That's why Spoke shares the top of S tier as the villain in waiting who might become the greatest of all time. So there you have it, from Assistance to Spoke's S tier villain transformation, these are the ranked villains of Unstable SMP.
But there's one villain I left out of those rankings, and that player is Parrot. In Parrot's recent video, he made a decision that might destroy the server entirely, but not in the way you'd think. This is how Parrot is killing Unstable SMP. But before we go any further, let me explain what actually happened first, because understanding what Parrot did is crucial to my theory. Parrot became king of the Unstable SMP through an election. He won against lettucek and everybody else, but the server didn't want him. The crowd literally booed him when he gave his speech since they wanted Lettuce to be king instead. So Parrot made a promise. He said if players can't spawn onto the server safely within 100 Minecraft days, he'd resign from being king. That sounds reasonable on the surface, making spawn safe so new players don't instantly die. Except here's what nobody talks about. Only 1 in 10 players made it out of spawn alive before Parrot became king. That's a 90% death rate at spawn. Keep that number in mind because it becomes critical later in the video. Parrot spent those 100 days doing 3 things. First, he killed every single wither at spawn with help from Teal, Faimada, and Horus. Withers had been terrorizing spawn for so long that getting past them was basically impossible for new players. Second, he had Horus completely rebuild spawn from scratch, making it safe so players wouldn't die from fall damage or environmental hazards. Third, he established automatic chicken farms with Frosty Vid to create unlimited food supplies for new players. By day 100, Parrot had accomplished his goal. New players were spawning in safely, praising him for saving them, thanking him for being king. The player base had grown exponentially according to the video. Parrot's kingdom grew with the influx of new players. He did it, he saved spawn, he proved he was worthy of being king. But here's the problem that's gonna destroy everything, and this is where Lettuce's warning becomes horrifying. Remember when Parrot went down to Lettuce's prison cell and asked him why people still hated him despite all his work? Lettuce said something that should have been a massive red flag. He said, if he really wanted to save all the players, he could have. But then asked Parrot why didn't he choose to. Think about what that means for a second. Lettuce had the power to save spawn. He controlled the law which had thousands of members. He could have easily cleared spawn and made it safe for everyone. But he deliberately chose not to. Why would a leader who claims to protect the server choose not to save spawn? Keep this question in mind because the answer reveals everything about Unstable SMP's true nature. Here's what Parrot doesn't understand yet, but all players absolutely do understand. The withers at spawn weren't random acts by a player, but instead they could have a deeper meaning behind them. Parrot even says this in the video. He tells Teal it's strange that players used up so many resources on withers to use at spawn, and he thought it might be trollers or griefers, but he doesn't understand why people would take it that far. The answer is simple, and it's the same reason Lettuce never saved spawn. The server can't handle unlimited players. Unstable SMP is a hardcore anarchy server where resources are finite, where land is limited, where every additional player means less resources for everyone else. Think about what happens now that Parrot removed that filter. Before Parrot became king, only the strongest and smartest and most determined players made it out of spawn alive. Those players earned their survival by getting past the withers and the chaos and the environmental hazards. They were the players who deserved to be on the server because they proved they could handle it. Now, everyone gets through spawn safely. Every single new player, regardless of skill or determination or preparation, gets free passage into the main server. They get free food from the chicken farms. They get protection from Parrot's infrastructure. They don't have to earn anything, and the population is growing exponentially according to the video. Let's talk about what exponential player growth means for a hardcore server with finite resources. Every player needs food constantly. They need tools, they need armor, they need building materials. The server has a limited amount of diamonds, a limited amount of ancient debris for netherite, a limited amount of land for building bases. When you have 100 players competing for those resources, the server functions. When you have 1,000 players competing for those resources, things get hard. When you have 10,000 players or even more competing for those resources, the server collapses entirely. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And Parrot just guaranteed that question gets answered soon, because he removed the one thing keeping population sustainable. Here's where letters are the warning becomes crucial. He told Parrot sometimes you have to do whatever it takes to protect the people, and said, you'll find out soon enough. What did Letters figure out that Parrot hasn't figured out yet? Letters understood that protecting players sometimes means making horrible decisions that seem evil on the surface. The law killed 1,000 players in the 2v1000 fight. Everyone called Letters a monster for sacrificing those players. But what if that sacrifice was necessary? What if Letters was using the law to control population just like the withers control population at spawn? That might also be why old players don't hate Letters the same way new players do. Old players understand that harsh leadership kept the server functioning, even if the methods were cruel. Now look at what's happening since Parrot became king. The old players still hate him according to the video, only new players support him. Why is that split so clear? Because old players see what's coming and new players don't. Old players remember when resources were available, when you could find diamonds without traveling thousands of blocks, when you could build a base without someone else already claiming the land. They know what happens when too many players exist on one server. The server lags, resources vanish, conflicts multiply, and everything collapses into chaos. New players don't see that yet because they just spawn in safely thanks to Parrot. They think he's a hero. They don't realize he's accidentally created a ticking time bomb. Let's talk about what happens in the next 100 days. More players keep spawning safely thanks to Parrot's infrastructure. The population keeps growing exponentially. Players start competing for the same diamond veins, the same ancient debris, the same chunks of land. Conflicts break out constantly because there's not enough resources to go around. The chicken farms can't produce enough food for thousands of players. The rebuild spawn gets overcrowded. Players start dying not from withers but from each other, from starvation, from resource scarcity. And here's the worst part, Parrot can't fix it. He can't bring resources back once they are mined. He can't create more land. He can't undo the exponential population growth he started. The server is already past the point of no return. Remember at the end of the video when Parrot says he doesn't care about who was responsible for the withers at spawn? That's the moment where he reveals he doesn't understand the system at all. He thinks the withers were just random griefing when they were actually the immune system of the server. Every organism needs an immune system to survive. The withers were Unstable SMP's immune system, keeping the population healthy by filtering out weak players. Parrot killed the immune system thinking he was saving people. But without an immune system, the server gets infected with overpopulation, and the infection spreads exponentially until the whole organism dies. Bro, this is what I studied biology for! Anyways, this is why Letters said the server was too far gone now and would never be united again. He saw exactly what would happen once population control got removed. The server would fracture into countless factions competing for scarce resources. Wars would break out constantly. Old players would turn hostile toward new players for consuming resources. The economy would collapse because diamonds lose value when nobody can find them anymore. Civilizations would rise and fall rapidly. And eventually players would stop joining entirely because the server would be unplayable. too laggy, too crowded, too chaotic. Parrot won the battle by becoming king and saving Spawn, but he lost the war by accidentally destroying the server's ability to sustain itself. Here's the dark truth that connects everything. Unstable SMP worked because it was brutal. The high death rate, the dangerous spawn, the constant wars, the ruthless factions, all of that filtered the population naturally, and kept resources available for the players who survived. Parrot tried to make the server kind and safe and welcoming. Those are good intentions, but good intentions don't matter when you break the fundamental systems that kept the server alive. Imagine asking a girl out, but she isn't interested in you at all, so you keep doing everything you can to try to get her to change her mind. This is basically what's happening with Parrot. He wanted to prove he was better than lettucek, that he could protect people without being a ruthless dictator, and then trying to prove that, he guaranteed that the server lettucek tried to protect would die anyway, just slower and more painfully than if lettucek had stated power. By day 100, Parrot had created a kingdom built on exponential growth with no population control. That is the textbook definition of cancer. And just like how cancer kills the organism it grows in, Parrot's kingdom will kill Unstable SMP. With all that said, Parrot's decision might lead to a war, which begs the question, if every Unstable SMP member fought each other, who would actually win? The obvious answer is Marlo, the #1 PvP player in the entire world. Marlo is ranked #1 worldwide on MC tiers. She dethroned its real me, who was considered unstoppable, and she's mastered literally every combat form that exists. Sword, spear, mace, crystals, KitPvP, she's better than everyone at everything. She even has a special ability that nobody else has. She can blind everyone around her before appearing, which means you don't even see her coming until it's too late. She guards the mafia tomb in the far end, which contains thousands of elytra and shulkers, which means she has access to unlimited resources if she needs them. So obviously Marlo wins, right? Well, keep that assumption in mind because we'll come back to why it's not that simple. Now let's look at the other contenders who could potentially win, because there are several players who have abilities that could change everything. Its real me is ranked #2 worldwide, formerly #1 before Marlo dethroned him. He's tier 1 in almost every game mode, he trained FlameFrags in advanced techniques, and he knows things that other players don't. Force grappling, horizontal pole catching, wind charge bee-hopping, entering the zone where combat masters achieve perfect focus. Its real me was hired by the director to assassinate Parrot and use the mace to kill half of the attacking bad players in seconds. The only reason he's not dominating the server right now is because he chose to retire after getting bored of winning every fight. But here's where things get interesting, and you want to remember this detail. Its real me is retired and was being hunted by the law, which means he might not even participate in this battle royale. If he does fight, he's definitely top tier, but if he stays retired, then the entire situation changes. Then we have Wemmbu and FlameFrags, who are constantly debating which one of them is actually the strongest player. Wemmbu has two maces named Gambit and Crucible. He has orbital strike cannons that can kill hundreds of players in a single shot, and he's extremely wealthy with multiple stacks of god apples. He's an elytra mace combo master. He killed 500 plus players during the 1000 vs 2 battle. He defeated FlameFrags using orbital strikes canonically, and he's destroyed entire civilizations with his nukes. FlameFrags on the other hand is a combat master who's trained in multiple weapon styles. Sword PvP is his best game mode according to its real me's assessment. He's excellent at TNT, minecart and KitPvP. He's very good with spears and he's mastered all 5 main weapons. But here's his secret advantage that nobody talks about enough. He has an orbital dart cannon that teleports thousands of wolves to his location. Every wolf is splashed with speed, strength and fire resistance potion. Every wolf wears armor. This provides chip damage, distractions and speed boosts through hitbox manipulation. He used this against Wemmbu and 1000 law players and it was devastatingly effective. Now here's something crucial that changes everything about this scenario. Let's talk about armies, because several players don't fight alone. They command massive forces that will absolutely be involved in the battle royale situation. Ashswag, before his defeat, led the biggest army in Minecraft server history, with hundreds of thousands of members. Every diamond player had a mace, all members were invisible at all times, and Ash had a master stasis. That meant if he died, everyone in the mafia died with him. lettucek commands the law, which has over 1000 members just in reserves alone, not counting the main army. He has talented sub-commanders. sophisticated structure with reserves and regulars and elite lawmen, and he adapts strategy per opponent. He's not a top PvPer himself, but his army capabilities are insane. He sent 1,000 players against just Flame and Wemmbu, and even though they lost, that kind of numbers advantage matters in the Battle Royale scenario where everyone's fighting everyone. Clownpierce rules the Nether, and commands an army that dominates an entire dimension. He has massive wealth from controlling ancient debris and netherite. He has Furry MC as his second in command, who's a top 50 worldwide player, and he has Empire backing with full army support. Clown is in the top 6,000 worldwide himself and has killed thousands of players throughout his career. Keep these armies in mind because in the true Battle Royale, it's not just individual skill that matters, it's who you're fighting with and who's targeting you. This becomes crucial to understanding who actually wins. Now let's address the special ability players who completely break normal combat rules. True Original is a hacker with reality warping abilities, light speed movement, terrain manipulation, inventory wiping, player teleportation, cloning, disguise, time manipulation, enhanced projectiles, and more. He's nearly impossible to kill through conventional means. The only reason he died was because Parrot and Newfilly used an invisible orbital strike cannon as a surprise attack. In a Battle Royale where everyone knows he's there, True Original could potentially just delete everyone's inventories and teleport away from danger forever. But here's the catch, and this is important, many believe True Original has admin connections, which means his participation might not be allowed in a fair Battle Royale scenario. If he's not in the fight, that removes one of the most broken abilities from the equation. Remember this because it matters for the final answer. Let's think about what would actually happen strategically when this Battle Royale starts. The first targets wouldn't be the strongest players, they'd be the biggest threats to everyone's survival. That means players like Wemmbu and his orbital strike cannons would get targeted immediately by multiple factions working together. Why? Because one nuke shot from Wemmbu can kill hundreds of players instantly, which means everyone else will want to eliminate him before he wipes out half the battlefield. Similarly, lettucek and his massive lore army would become an immediate target for players like FlameFrags, who has a personal grudge against them, or Wemmbu who they imprison, or Spoke who they've been hunting. The lost numbers are threatening, but they're mostly inexperienced chungies from spawn, which means skilled players could farm them for kills while eliminating Lettuce's political power. Ashswag with the mafia is interesting enough because his master stasis means killing him kills everyone in the mafia. That's thousands of players eliminated instantly if someone manages to kill Ash. But remember, Ash doesn't wear armor out of confidence, and he relies on stasis chambers to teleport away when damaged. In a Battle Royale scenario where multiple elite players are hunting him, he might not be able to escape in time. Here's where dynamics get really interesting. Marlo is guarding the Mafia tomb in the far end, which means she's not at spawn where the Battle Royale would likely take place. She's isolated thousands of blocks away, protecting a tomb that she can't leave or thousands of players die from the stasis chambers activating. That's her biggest weakness, limited mobility. She doesn't want to kill anyone due to moral restraint. She's guarding the tomb, which limits where she can go, and she has limited access to guard apples and XP due to isolation. So even though Marlo is the #1 PvP player worldwide, she might not even participate in this Battle Royale because leaving the tomb means catastrophic consequences. Keep this in mind because it completely changes who actually wins. Let's talk about the players who thrives in chaotic scenarios. Theobald the Bird is the COD PvP master who trains FlameFrags. He can clear huge groups of enemies, he has good defensive capabilities, and he's one of the richer players on the server. In a Battle Royale with hundreds of players fighting, COD PvP becomes incredibly effective for taking out multiple targets. But Theo has a critical weakness, he's resource heavy. Each COD takes one inventory slot, and he struggles after his CODs run out. Jaderman has a mace and a Riptide Trident as his primary weapon, but he has a critical weakness that makes him nearly useless. He's weather dependent. Without rain, his Riptide Trident becomes completely useless, and he loses all his advantage. In a Battle Royale scenario, unless it's raining, Jaden becomes a much easier target who can't utilize his main combat style. Now let's consider the strategic players who don't win through direct combat. Parrot X2 is a strategic mastermind who creates innovative strategies on the fly. He killed True Original using an invisible orbital strike cannon with Newfilly, which was the only known method to kill the hacker. Parrot's strength isn't raw PvP skill, it's unconventional thinking. thinking. In a battle royale, he'd likely try to form temporary alliances and use traps rather than direct combat. Spokeishere is the exploit master who destroyed the invisible mafia stasis chambers. He has poor PvP skills and almost every fight shows him running and waiting for friends to help, but he might still have the command block in his ender chest that was never seen destroyed. If he has exploits available, he becomes dangerous. Without exploits, he's significantly weaker and will be eliminated early. So here's what would actually happen if every unstable member fought each other in a battle royale. The fight would start with massive armies clashing. The lost 1000+ members would engage with clownpierce nether forces and ashswag's mafia members. This creates absolute chaos where hundreds of players are dying in seconds. Wemmbu would immediately try to use orbital strike cannons to wipe out as many players as possible, but FlameFrags, who has a personal rivalry against him, would deploy his orbital dark cannon and engage Wemmbu directly while he's vulnerable after launching strikes. Remember that Wemmbu ran out of orbital strikes after the 1000 vs 2 battle, so if he doesn't have them restocked again, he's limited to mace combat. It's real me, if he participates, would likely target whoever he was hired to kill. The elite PvPers like clownpierce and furry MC will be fighting multiple opponents simultaneously. Clown has killed thousands of players throughout his career, but in a scenario where he's facing FlameFrags and It's Real Me and potentially others at once, even he would struggle. Ashswag would be hiding and using his stasis chambers to teleport away from danger, but without his armor, if multiple skilled players like Flame or It's corner him, he'd have seconds to react before dying. And remember, killing Ash kills everyone in the mafia instantly through his master stasis. Strategic players like Parrot would be setting up traps and forming temporary alliances. Spoke would be trying to use exploits if he has them, or hiding if he doesn't. Teal would be launching TNT minecarts into the massive army battles, racking up kills on inexperienced players. And Marlo, she'd either not participate due to guarding the tomb, or if she did join, she'd arrive late after blinding everyone, assess the situation with a supreme combat mastery, and start eliminating whoever's left standing. Here's the reality, if Marlo participates, she wins. She's the #1 PvP player worldwide. She has mastered every combat form, and her blindness ability gives her the element of surprise. The only players who could potentially challenge her are It's Real Me if he's fully focused, or True Original if his hacking abilities are allowed. But It's Real Me is retired and avoiding conflict, and True Original's admin connection status makes him questionable for fair competition. But if Marlo doesn't participate because she can't leave the tomb, then the winner is It's Real Me if he fights, or FlameFrags if It's Real Me stays retired. Flame has the versatility, the combat mastery across multiple weapons, the dark cannon for crowd control, and the raw determination to never give up. He'd survive the initial army chaos, eliminate the strategic strats like Wembu's orbital strikes, and outlast everyone else through superior combat fundamentals. The dark horse winner is Parrot if he manages to survive long enough to salvage invisible orbital strike traps. He's killed the unkillable True Original through unconventional tactics, which means he could potentially eliminate stronger fighters through strategy rather than direct combat. But Unstable SMP isn't just about strength, because it actually represents sadness. You see, there are 7 characters on Unstable SMP who perfectly represent the 7 stages of grief, and some of these stages will genuinely shock you, just like stage 1, shock. And this is best shown by Parrot, who experiences shock constantly. A good example is when he discovered the invisible mafia's true scale. When the director revealed himself as Weefies, he was stunned and paralyzed. Every twist leaves him frozen. His entire story is being shocked, and he can't act quickly when overwhelmed. Keep this pattern of being frozen by information in mind for later. After shock wears off comes stage 2, denial, and this is perfectly shown by spokeishere. Denial is refusing to believe reality, avoiding the truth and pretending it's not happening. Spoke has this "it's fine" energy even when the server is collapsing. When the mafia controlled everything, he kept saying it was manageable. When the server was falling apart, what did he do? He got a pet salmon named George Jr., literally denying reality through distraction. He denied the mafia was as powerful as they were until forced to face it. He denied that exploits alone wouldn't save them. He potentially has the command blocks in ender chest but refuses to acknowledge it. In almost every fight, Spoke runs away, literally running from the reality of his poor combat skills. Remember this denial pattern because it connects to something important later. After denial comes something far more destructive, which is anger, and Wemmbu is the perfect example. Anger is intense fury at the situation, lashing out at everyone, uncontrolled rage. Wemmbu is is the perfect embodiment of anger. He went on an orbital strike rampage, destroyed multiple civilizations out of fury. He screams at everyone, at Jaden, at the law, at anyone who crosses him. He gets furious when others have maces. He's constantly threatening to destroy people and actually does it. He killed 500 plus law players in one battle, just massacring them out of anger. When Jaden tricked him, Wemmbu annihilated his entire castle with orbital strikes. He destroyed Capital City. He destroyed the Lost Base. He destroyed the Zam Empire. Everywhere he goes, destruction follows. And here's what makes it tragic. All this rage stems from grief over losing Akechan. His best friend got trapped in the end because of Wembu's actions. Instead of processing that loss healthily, Wemmbu turned it into destructive wrath. But not everyone expresses grief through destruction. Some try to negotiate with reality itself. Stage 4. Bargaining. And FlameFrags represents this perfectly. Bargaining is that if only thinking, trying to negotiate, seeking any way to undo or fix things. FlameFrags' entire arc is bargaining. If only I was stronger, everything would be okay. That's why he went on a training arc. He literally bargained with Itsurumi in order to get trained to become the best. When Swipe was sent to assassinate him, Flame bargained for his life by offering gear. He participates in tournaments thinking, if I win this, I'll prove I'm the strongest. He constantly tries to prove his worth through combat. He burns maces repeatedly because he's bargaining with skill itself. If only people would fight with real skill, I'd be recognized. He changed his armor trim from diamond to redstone, physical representation of bargaining with his identity. He created the Arbol Dark Cannon thinking, if only I had an advantage like others have. His entire existence is trying to negotiate terms with reality where his strength is finally enough. But eventually when shock fades, denial breaks, anger burns out, and bargaining fails, you're left with something darker. Stage 5. Depression. And this is where Marlowe comes in. Depression is deep sadness, overwhelming loneliness, feeling empty and hopeless. Marlowe wrote this in her books. I'm only pretending to be a monster to scare people away, but recently I've started to believe that maybe I really am a monster. That's not anger, that's depression talking. When you've internalized the pain so deeply you believe the worst about yourself. Marlowe is forced into isolation in the far end, guarding the mafia tomb completely alone. Ultimate loneliness. She desperately wishes to see her best friend again. Deep sadness over their separation. She kills people she doesn't want to kill. Trapped in a cycle of violence she hates but can't escape. She rarely speaks. Her silence reflects depression. She hated being in the mafia because everyone had to stay invisible. She couldn't see anyone's real faces including her friends, and here's the hopeless part. If she leaves the tomb, thousands die from rigged stasis chambers. No escape from this prison. She writes books full of feelings. Books number 1, 35 and 66. Just to cope with overwhelming sadness. Marlowe is the saddest character. The world's best fighter trapped in endless depression with no way out. Keep this hopeless isolation in mind because it represents the lowest point before people try to move forward. But unlike Danger Marlowe, some people eventually start experimenting with new approaches. Stage 6. Testing. And lettucek represents this perfectly. Testing is trying new approaches, experimenting with solutions, testing what works in this new reality. lettucek built an entirely new system from nothing. He created the law to test what brings order. He implemented a redemption program testing if criminals can be reformed. He literally says, I offered them a second chance. Experimenting with giving people opportunities. He built an elaborate prison system testing new justice structures. He uses different strategies per opponent. Weakness arrows for FlameFrags, traps for others. Constantly testing approaches. He tested becoming the leader to see if he could actually lead. The 1000 player army was a massive test of whether mass numbers overcome skill. He built an orbital strike cannon testing new weapons. He tested public executions like with Spectacle to see if fear-based control worked. Every single thing Lettuce does is testing a hypothesis. At this point bro, he might as well be my physics teacher dog. He's constantly experimenting with new systems, new approaches, new ideas to see what sticks. Remember this experimentation pattern because testing is how people try to regain control after losing everything. But there's one final stage beyond testing. Stage 7. Acceptance. And Itsurumi represents this completely. Acceptance is accepting the new reality, finding peace with what happened, moving forward with purpose. Itsurumi retired from fighting even though he was unstoppable. He genuinely accepted he didn't need to prove anything anymore. He literally said, I was unstoppable and I'm done. Made peace with his power and chose to step back. He trained FlameFrags instead of competing with him, accepting his role as as a mentor rather than fighter. He's focused with no anger or need for validation. He's found inner peace. He blocks out distractions and streamlines his mission focus, clarity, and purpose. When he took the director's assassination contract, he accepted what needed to be done without emotion. No anger, no joy, just acceptance of the task. He almost killed Parrot multiple times without emotional investment, just calm acceptance of his job. He's mastered the zone in combat, that flow state where you've transcended normal emotional reactions. Its real me represents acceptance in its purest form. He's moved beyond all other grief stages to find genuine peace. He's the enlightened warrior who has nothing left to prove. But what if I told you that these 7 stages don't just represent individual characters? Well, they represent the Unstable SMP itself. This hardcore server is a grief machine. You start in shock when you first experience the brutality. You move into denial, trying to pretend it's not that bad. You explode into anger when denial fails. You bargain, trying to make deals with reality. You sink into depression when bargaining fails. You start testing new approaches to survive, and if you're lucky, you reach acceptance. But here's the catch: most players never make it to acceptance like It's Real Me did. Parrot is stuck in shock, frozen by revelations. Spoke is trapped in denial, running from reality. Wemmbu is consumed by anger that never ends. FlameFrags is locked in internal bargaining, always proving himself. Marlow is drowning in depression with no escape. Even lettucek in testing eventually failed and got imprisoned. The server doesn't let people heal, it keeps them trapped in the grief stages forever. The only person who achieved acceptance did so by retiring completely. That's the dark truth. Grief on this server doesn't end. It just cycles through stages eternally until you break or quit entirely. The Unstable SMP isn't a hardcore Minecraft server. It's a machine that traumatizes players and prevents them from processing that trauma. It builds shock, feeds denial and anger, fuels bargaining, depression, and desperate testing. But at the end of the day, on the world's largest hardcore server where everyone has just one life, players will do whatever it takes to survive, even if it means staying trapped in grief forever. But to truly understand the art of Unstable SMP, we need to compare the strongest villains on the server, starting with the Mafia and the Law. From a faction that stayed invisible at all times to an organization that tried to serve justice, when you think of Unstable SMP's most dangerous faction, one name comes to mind. But you're probably thinking of the wrong one. This is why the Invisible Mafia versus the Law isn't close. Let's start by looking at how each faction operated. The Invisible Mafia, led by ashswag, was the biggest faction the server had ever seen. They controlled almost the entire server through fear and intimidation, and ashswag was so confident he didn't even wear armor most of the time. The Mafia forced innocent players to join or die, killed their own members if they failed tasks, and ashswag set up a master stasis chamber so that if he died, every single person in the Mafia died with him. The Mafia's methods were brutal and direct. Invisible players would hunt you down, blow up your base, destroy entire civilizations like the Fallens, and force you to join or die. They operated through fear, and everyone knew exactly who they were and what they were capable of. The Law, led by lettucek in Season 2, operates completely differently, and this difference is important. Their power comes from manipulation and controlling the narrative about what's happening on the server. lettucek isn't the strongest fighter, doesn't have the best weapons, isn't even considered one of the most skilled players. But he's intelligent and willing to use tactics most people wouldn't think of. Let's look at the Law's most famous moment, the 2v1000 fight. lettucek captured thousands of unskilled players and gave them a choice: work for the Law or die. Then he sent these completely inexperienced players to fight FlameFrags and Wemmbu, two of the strongest players on the server. lettucek knew that these players had no chance of winning. He wanted them to lose because that loss gave him something more valuable than a victory. After the fight ended with Flame and Wemmbu killing 1,000 players, lettucek called a massive server-wide event and revealed that these two had killed 1,000 players, 10% of the server's population. He framed them as ruthless serial killers who murdered innocent people, and the entire server believed him even though it was self-defense. That's manipulation at the highest level. You make everyone else beat your enemies by controlling what people believe about them. The Law controls spawn in the end dimension, giving them unlimited recruitment potential. Every time a player spawns in, the Law recruits them into believing they are fighting for justice. Even when hundreds of lawmen die in battles, they just recruit more the next day from spawn. The Mafia relied on a completely different system. They had a ranking structure with copper, iron, gold, and diamond tiers, and you had to prove yourself through combat and missions to move up. Spoke had to infiltrate the Mafia and work his way up, completing increasingly difficult missions. He literally had to kill an innocent player named I Majestic Rose just to move up to gold tier. To become a diamond tier player in the Mafia, you had to defeat another diamond tier player in actual combat, which meant every diamond rank member had generally proven themselves as one of the strongest fighters on the server. But anyways, let's talk about what happened when players fought each faction. When Spoke's team tried to infiltrate the Mafia, they had to be extremely careful about everything. They couldn't just fight their way through, they had to earn ranks slowly, complete missions perfectly, gain trust over time. The Mafia was so dangerous that the only way to beat them wasn't direct combat. It was finding and destroying their stasis chambers while they weren't looking. Now let's look at what happened when skilled players fought the law. Wemmbu walked into the law's base, dropped a nuke with an orbital strike cannon, and walked out without a scratch. FlameFrags soloed law forces multiple times with no difficulty. In the 2v1000 fight, Flame and Wemmbu fought 1,000 lawmen and won decisively, farming kills for the most of the fight. The only reason Wemmbu got captured was because he was exhausted after killing hundreds of players and ran out of resources. When Spoke fought against the law in the Minecraft Trapper versus 1,000 players, he killed hundreds of lawmen by himself just using traps and basic strategy, because the law's forces were so inexperienced that simple traps worked repeatedly. Compare that to when Parrot and Weefies tried to fight the Mafia directly. They couldn't walk in and fight like Wemmbu did with the law. They had to run and hide constantly, needed entire teams and elaborate plans, had to build District 13 as a safe haven just to survive. And even with all that preparation, they still couldn't kill ashswag, because his master stasis meant killing him would kill all their friends trapped in the Mafia. Now let's talk about something most people overlook, and this is where the debate really shifts. The Mafia had a very specific type of member. The Mafia's ranks included players like clownpierce, literally one of the deadliest Minecraft players to ever exist. FlameFrags, who went on a training arc to become even stronger and never gives up regardless of odds. It's Real Me, who is considered Minecraft's best player. Marlo, who guts the Mafia team with enough gear and skill to take over the entire server. Well, that was until she got exposed for being Mario. Manepear, who literally trains other players to become combat masters. Lettucek, who guts the end dimension and has fought players like Wemmbu to a standstill. These were diamond and gold tier players who proved themselves through actual combat. Now let's look at the Law's roster. Most members are what FlameFrags and Wemmbu call chungies. Completely inexperienced players who just spawned in and got recruited immediately. They got protection 2 diamond armor and a white banner shield. That's it for equipment and training. lettucek admits he recruits directly from spawn constantly, which means the vast majority of the Law's forces have zero combat experience or PvP knowledge. The Law does have some competent members like Deputy Ace, Stars Lord, God of War, and the Ouroboros as high-ranking officers. They have elite force members who get protection 4 netherite armor with black banner shields. But here's the question, how many truly skilled fighters does the Law actually have compared to the Mafia's proven diamond tier players? Let's look at specific matchups. When the Law sent 1,000 players against just 2 opponents, even with a 500 to 1 advantage, they still lost badly. Flame and Wemmbu killed hundreds of them, and the only player who posed a real threat was That Guy, who they eventually took out. The rest were just free kills. Think about what that means. 1,000 players with a 500 to 1 advantage couldn't beat 2 skilled opponents. Now imagine if those 2 skilled players were instead facing clownpierce or It's Real Me. That's a completely different fight with a completely different outcome. The Mafia attracted strong players who wanted power and were willing to do whatever it took. That's why players like clownpierce and FlameFrags were part of the Mafia at various points, because the faction was generally powerful and offered real opportunities for skilled players to gain more power. The Mafia's recruitment was selective and based on actual strength. The Law attracts whoever spawns in and accepts their recruitment offer, which means mostly inexperienced players who don't know any better. Any skilled player who works with the Law like lettucek or bad members do it for political reasons or temporary alliances, not because the Law is actually strong enough to protect them. Let's look at what happened when each faction's leadership was threatened. When players tried to kill ashswag, he would escape using his stasis chambers and send even more dangerous forces after them. The threat level increased when he went after ashswag because he had the power and skilled members to make you regret it. When lettucek gets questioned by members like Spectacle or Deputy Ace, he resorts to public executions and manipulation to maintain control. He executed Spectacle by dropping an anvil on him in front of the entire server just to make an example, because his leadership is based on fear and narrative control rather than combat power. Now here's where we need to address the elephant in the room. Let's actually count the top tier fighters on each side, because this is where the debate ends. The Mafia had clownpierce, one of the deadliest players in Minecraft history. It's real me, literally the best Minecraft player. FlameFrags on the training arc to become even stronger. Marlow, Minecraft's biggest cheater. And that's just the diamond tier players we know about. There were also dozens of gold tier players who proved themselves through combat. The Law has lettucek, who isn't known for combat skill, Deputy Ace and maybe a handful of officers who are competent fighters, some elite force members with better armor, and then thousands of inexperienced chongies who get destroyed every single time they fight anyone with actual skill. The skill gap isn't just significant, it's absolutely massive! Here's the reality people don't want to admit: numbers don't matter when the skill gap is this huge. We've seen this proven multiple times. 2 skilled players beat 1,000 unskilled ones. 1 skilled player with traps beats hundreds with unskilled ones. Every time skilled players fight the Lost Forces, it's not a contest, it's just a farming simulator. At this point, Unstable SMP might as well be Grow a Garden, bruh. And if you're thinking, but the Law has unlimited recruitment so they can just keep sending more players. Remember that the Mafia proved they could handle massive numbers. They took over the entire server despite constant opposition, destroyed civilizations, survived infiltration attempts, and the only reason they fell was because Spoke destroyed their stasis chambers, not because anyone beat them in combat. So let's imagine what would actually happen if both factions went to war. The Mafia would send clownpierce, It's Real Me, and FlameFrags to the lost positions, probably with invisibility potions. These 3 players alone would tear through hundreds of inexperienced lawmen before anyone figured out what was happening. Then the rest of the Mafia's diamond and gold tier players would join in, and it would be complete massacre. The Law's only possible advantage is their control of spawn for recruitment, but that doesn't matter when your recruits are getting killed faster than you can replace them by players who are infinitely more skilled. It's like trying to fight a professional MMA fighter by sending 100 untrained people at them one after another. The skill gap is insurmountable. Damn, bro, that's a big word. I bet my English teacher is mad proud of me right now. Remember when Wemmbu destroyed the Lost base by just walking in and dropping a nuke? Now imagine if the Mafia, with all their coordination and skilled players, decided to do coordinated attacks on the Lost positions. The Law couldn't stop 1 skilled player with a nuke. How would they possibly stop an organized assault from the most dangerous players on the server working together? When you look at the combat records, the skill levels, and everything else, the Mafia would absolutely destroy the Law in any direct confrontation, and it wouldn't even be close. The Law's power comes from manipulation, not from actual combat strength. The Mafia's power came from having the deadliest and most skilled players in Minecraft history all working together. In the war between these 2 factions, skill beats numbers every time, especially when the skill gap is this massive. The only reason the Law exists in Season 2 is because the Mafia was already destroyed in Season 1. If both factions existed at the same time, the Law would have been crushed within days by players they couldn't even compete with. But there's another villain that we haven't talked about yet, the Director. From a ruthless villain who killed thousands of players to a mastermind who faked his own death, when you think of Unstable SMP's worst villain, one name probably comes to mind. But chances are you're probably thinking of the wrong one. This is why ashswag vs the Director isn't close. Let's start with who everyone thinks is the answer. ashswag, the leader of the Invisible Mafia, a player so confident in his own power that he literally didn't wear armor because he knew he didn't need it. He built the biggest faction in Unstable history, forced innocent players to join or die, killed his own members when they failed tasks, and even set up a master stasis chamber so that if he died, everyone in the Mafia died with him. Thousands of players held hostage by 1 person's life. That's generally insane levels of evil and control. ashswag's methods were brutal and direct. He teleported You Smell Like Updog straight into the void for simply revealing he was the leader, which is crazy when you think about it. He destroyed entire civilizations including the Fallens just to prove a point about his dominance. And when Parrot and Weefies finally had the chance to kill him and end all the suffering, they couldn't, because killing ashswag meant killing everyone they cared about who was trapped in the Mafia. But here's where things get interesting. Everyone knew ashswag was evil. There was no mystery about it, no illusion, nothing hidden. When you saw invisible players running around, you knew the mafia was coming for you. When ashswag showed up at your base, you knew someone was about to die or be forced into his cult. He operated completely in plain sight because he didn't need to hide from anyone on the server. His power came from fear, from having thousands of members, from controlling almost the entire server at one point. As for the director, nobody even knew he existed until it was too late. Think about that for a second. While ashswag was out here building an entire empire, making himself the most hated player on the entire server, the director was operating in complete secrecy, and for the longest time, nobody had any idea who he actually was, or what his endgame even looked like. Even when Bat, the bounty assassin team, dedicated themselves to hunting him down and finding his identity, they couldn't figure it out. They even started accusing Parrot of being the director, which is honestly wild. Now let's talk about their actual methods and how they approach being villains. ashswag's power came from external force. The mafia had thousands of members spread across the entire server, but the moment Spoke destroyed all the stasis chambers, the mafia ended just like that. His entire empire collapsed in a single moment because his power relied on systems and structures, and other people doing his work for him. The director's power was completely internal and psychological, which is far more dangerous. He didn't need thousands of players working for him. He didn't need invisibility or complex stasis systems or massive faction with ranks. He needed one single thing: understanding exactly how Parrot thinks and what motivates him. Let's actually look at what the director accomplished with this approach. He hired It's Real Me, who is literally Minecraft's best player, one of the most skilled PvPers to ever exist, to hunt down Parrot. It's Real Me explicitly stated that he hunted Parrot specifically because the director told him to. Just think about the level of influence and power required to make a player of that caliber just follow your orders without question. Then came Mr. Cube 6, and this is where it gets really insane. The director taunted the entire Bat team by mentioning a yellow dandelion, which was such a small and specific detail that literally nobody should have known about it except the people who were actually there. This single moment proved to everyone that the director knew everything about them. Every conversation they had, every move they made, every tiny detail about Parrot's entire life. And here's where it gets even crazier. When Bat finally managed to imprison Mr. Cube for the second time, thinking they finally had the upper hand and caught one of the director's people, the director just used the stasis chamber to teleport him out like it was nothing. Then in the very next page of the book Mr. Cube left behind for them, the director wrote this: "Don't worry about Cube. His job is done. Not because you beat him, but because I said so." Read that message again and let it sink in. The director didn't even care that his assassin got caught and imprisoned by the enemy team, because getting caught was literally part of the plan all along. Every single loss was calculated, every failure was intentional and served a greater purpose. ashswag lost permanently when his stasis chambers got destroyed by Spoke. The director never actually lost anything, because losing was just another step in the story he was writing, which is terrifying. But perhaps the most disturbing part of the director's methods is Paragon, which is Minecraft's most secure prison ever created on Unstable SMP. Every single escape attempt that Parrot made was predicted before he even tried it. He tried using a fishing rod to pull weefies off a flying machine to escape, but he got predicted and countered immediately. He tried crafting a wooden sword to crit him out and fight his way free, but he got predicted and stopped. He tried to fake an escape through the nether roof while secretly going somewhere else, but he got predicted and he got caught. He even tried dropping dripstone from above to kill weefies who was AFK, and you already know it, he got predicted. It was literally like watching someone play chess against an opponent who's already seen every single possible move you could make 10 steps ahead. Parrot wasn't fighting against a person anymore. He was fighting against a script, a story that had already been written with one possible ending that the director had decided from the start. And remember how the director controlled Bat and used them against Parrot. He didn't threaten them directly, he didn't attack them with force or try to kill them like ashswag would. He used their relationships and friendships against them as weapons. Jumper Hood, the Rapture and Leerwook weren't hired as prison guards for money or power. They were used as leverage against Parrot's own emotions. This is something ashswag never actually understood about control. ashswag thought control came purely from fear and direct threats. The director's control came from a completely different place. It came from love and obsession and deep understanding. From knowing that Parrot would never abandon his friends, never stop trying to save people, never give up on someone he cared about no matter what the cost. And that's a type of control you literally can't break by just getting stronger or better at PvP, because fighting against it means betraying everything you are as a person. Let's talk about intelligence levels between these two villains. Ashswag was smart, there's no question about that. He manipulated Spoke by pretending to be poor and hopeless to gain his trust, so he could get access to important books and information. He used fear as a matter of control very effectively, but the director's intelligence was on a completely different level that nobody else has reached on the server. He tracked every single item in Parrot's inventory down to the exact number. But here's the scariest part about all of this. The director did everything I just described while everyone on the server thought he was completely dead. He faked his own death by replacing himself with a tame dog that he named Weefies. When ashswag dropped him into the void in front of Parrot, what actually died was just the dog, not the real Weefies at all. From that moment forward, Weefies became an invisible player, operating as the director while Parrot thought he lost his best friend and had no idea. Think about the level of deception and planning required to pull something like that off. Ashswag manipulated people through direct threats and fear tactics that everyone could see. The director manipulated reality itself and made everyone believe he was dead. Ashswag's motivation was pretty simple and straightforward when you break it down. He wanted to take over the server and rule it completely. And he almost succeeded in doing exactly that, but the director's motivation was far more disturbing when you really think about it. He didn't want power over the entire server like ashswag did. He wanted complete power over one single person, which was Parrot. Every action he took, every trap he built, every manipulation he orchestrated was designed with one purpose: to keep Parrot safe by controlling every single aspect of his life. And that obsessive need to protect someone by controlling them is actually far more terrifying than just wanting to rule a server. When the director finally revealed himself to Parrot in that prison, he explained everything that led to this point. He talked about the specific moment in the end when Parrot separated from their group to serve as a distraction so others could escape. The moment when the director knew Parrot was in serious trouble but was completely helpless to save him or do anything about it. And from that point onward, he said it happened over and over again. Parrot sacrificing himself for causes that only existed in his head, and the director being unable to protect him from himself. So he made the decision to fake his death, build an entirely new identity from nothing, hire the best players on the entire server, manipulate entire teams and factions, create elaborate prisons, and orchestrate everything just to prove one point to Parrot: that he couldn't be safe on his own and needed to be controlled for his own good. And here's the part that really shows the fundamental difference between these two villains. Even at the very end, standing on those pressure plates where one wrong move would kill them both instantly, the director had already won everything he wanted, because the only reason Parrot escaped at all was because he managed to smuggle in a spyglass, dropped it onto the pressure plate to hold it down, and then walked away to freedom. And the director, seeing his prized spyglass sitting there on the plate, the same one Parrot had sacrificed so much to save earlier in their journey together, stepped off his pressure plate to pick it up. The director died not because Parrot outsmarted him or was more intelligent in that moment, but because the director chose his emotional connection to Parrot over his own life in that final second. That's the core difference between these two villains that nobody talks about. Ashswag would have let that spyglass burn in lava without a second thought if it meant surviving. The director couldn't do it because that item meant too much to him. So who's actually the worst villain when you break down everything? The one who killed thousands of innocent players for power and control, or the one who psychologically tortured his best friend out of obsession and twisted love? Well, when it comes to pure calculated psychological evil and manipulation, it's honestly not even close between these two. The director is Unstable SMP's most terrifying villain by far, and what makes it even scarier is that he genuinely never thought he was the villain at all. He thought he was the hero protecting his friend from the dangers of the server. But recently, a new faction led by Jamato P has secretly taken over the server. So, is Null actually strong? The Invisible Mafia used to be the strongest villains, but when it comes to facing Null, it's not even close. In this video, I'll be finding Unstable SMP's strongest faction, and breaking down why the Mafia vs Null Hunters isn't even close. Let me start with the evidence that immediately ends this debate, because once you understand what the Null Hunters can actually do, you realize the Mafia never stood a chance. The Null Hunters have an exploit called the Totem Teleport glitch, and it's genuinely broken. Here's how it works. They use quantum entangled totems where one totem is in their hand, one is in a chest connected to a stasis machine, and a third reference is in other squad leaders' inventories as an instant notification system. When their totem pops in combat, they don't just survive, they instantly teleport away to safety using the stasis chamber. That means Null Hunter squad leaders are essentially unkillable in normal combat. You can't kill them with swords or maces or explosives because the moment you pop their totem, they just disappear like your girlfriend. Oh wait, you don't have one. Keep this totem teleport exploit in mind because it becomes absolutely critical when we compare it to the Mafia's restrictions. Now let's talk about the Invisible Mafia so you understand what they were actually capable of. The Mafia led by ashswag was literally the biggest faction the server had ever seen, with hundreds of thousands of members. They had a proper system with diamond tier at the top who all had maces except FlameFrags, then gold, iron, copper, and trimless players ranked by their armor trims. The Mafia conquered the End Civilization, the Farlands, Skyblock Civilization, Square Civilization. They built a massive spawn prison. They controlled the majority of the server's resources. These weren't just random players causing chaos, this was an organized empire that dominated Season 1 through sheer numbers and fear. Diamond tier players like clownpierce and Furry MC led civilization destruction across the entire server. That's the level of power the Mafia operated at. But here's where things get interesting, and this is what most people miss when they argue the Mafia would win. The Mafia had strict rules that created massive combat disadvantages, and the biggest one was this: members can't carry totems because if a totem pops, it will reveal their identity, and they'd be instantly killed by the stasis chamber system. Think about what that means for a second. Every Mafia member fights without totems, without that extra life, without any safety net. Meanwhile, the Null Hunters not only can use totems, they have an exploit that makes their totems teleport them to safety when they pop. The Mafia fights with 0 totems, Null fights with teleporting totems. That's like putting a baby up against Prime Muhammad Ali. Let's look at the Null Hunters' actual combat capabilities because their roster is genuinely terrifying. The Null Hunters operate in squads with 2 divisions: Elite Spawn Squads, who are bounty hunters with exploits, and Farlands Patrols, who control territory. The Spawn Squads have higher speed stats than normal players, so they can cover more ground and chase targets down. They traverse through the nether for faster movement. They have impossible shields with patterns unobtainable in survival. They have multi-shot black firework crossbows to slow and drain targets. And remember that totem teleport exploit that makes them unkillable. Their hunting pressure is equivalent if not higher than that of the Invisible Mafia, which means Null Hunters apply the same level of relentless pursuit but with better abilities. Here's how Null Hunters actually fight, and pay attention to the strategy because it perfectly counters everything the Mafia does. Null Hunters don't try to kill you quickly. They systematically drain all your resources over time. Your armor durability, your food, your totems, everything. They force march you to their pro cannon called the Road of Null in the Farlands. They kill all passing players on sight with no negotiations and no mercy. If you somehow manage to kill a squad leader, the other leaders are instantly notified via the totem exploit, and squads merge immediately to hunt you down. Now let's talk about what happens when skilled players actually fought each faction, because the combat records tell completely different stories. When players try to fight the Mafia, they had to be strategic and careful. Spoke had to infiltrate over time, unrank slowly, complete missions perfectly. But when the fight actually happened, here's what mattered. Spoke and his small team destroyed the Mafia by finding and destroying their stasis chambers. Not through direct combat, not through superior skill, through exploiting the Mafia's critical infrastructure weakness. The Mafia had hundreds of thousands of members, but they lost because they had a single point of total failure that could be exploited. Now compare that to the Null Hunter's combat record. The only confirmed Null Hunter death is a squad leader named 188X, who was killed by an arrow cannon. Not by swords, not by maces, not by explosives, by a specific piece of technology that most players don't even know how to build. That's the only way to kill Null spawn squads. Arrow cannons, because everything else just pops their totem and they teleport away. Remember how I said the Mafia can't use totems at all? Now imagine them fighting an enemy that can only be killed with arrow cannons that the Mafia doesn't know about and can't practice with because using them would reveal their identities. Let's examine the Null Hunter's other abilities because the totem exploit isn't even their only advantage. Null Farlands Patrols can light nether portals in the Farlands, which is impossible for normal players. Wemmbu himself couldn't don't do this. They patrol and take over Farland's territory with abilities nobody else has. The spawn squads might have possible origin from the underworld with similar black skin as Soul Keepers. They travel through the nether without clownpierce even knowing they're there. There's speculation they may be entities that lagged Wemmbu and Booster under the glow block altar, possibly revived through glitches, which would explain their glitch names and appearance. Whether that's true or not, the fact remains that null hunters have supernatural level abilities that go beyond normal Minecraft mechanics. Here's where we need to talk about the Mafia's fatal weaknesses, because they have multiple catastrophic vulnerabilities that would destroy them against null. First, their stasis chambers can be destroyed. Spoke literally proved this, and it ended the entire Mafia instantly. Second, if ashswag dies, everyone in the Mafia dies with him through the master stasis. That's a single point of total failure. Third, identity reveals equals instant death. If a Mafia member kills someone, their name shows in chat and they're exposed and executed. Fourth, no totems allowed, which is a massive disadvantage against any competent opponent. Now let's look at null's weaknesses. To be fair, they can be killed by arrow cannons, but only the spawn squads are at risk, and most players don't know this. Their leader is unknown, so they can't be easily targeted. They have smaller numbers than the Mafia, so they could theoretically be overwhelmed, but notice something about those weaknesses. They are all conditional or unknown. The Mafia's weaknesses are absolute and proven. Stasis chambers were destroyed. Ashswag can die, members must stay invisible, no totems ever. Let's run through actual battle scenarios because this is where the evidence becomes undeniable. Scenario 1. Open warfare at spawn. The Mafia sends hundreds of thousands of invisible members in a massive wave. Null spawn squads activate and use their speed advantage plus totem teleport to survive the initial assault. Then Null starts draining Mafia resources using their multi-shot firework crossbows and relentless pursuit. Mafia members can't wear totems, so when their armor breaks, they just die. Null members teleport away when threatened and comes back at full strength. The result isn't even close. Null wins through superior tactics and survivability, despite being massively outnumbered. Scenario 2. Assassination mission. Null hunters identify and target ashswag specifically. Ashswag doesn't wear armor because he's overconfident in his power. Null uses their speed advantage, resource drain tactics, and relentless pursuit to hunt him down. Ashswag can't escape forever because Null can travel through the nether faster and has higher movement speed. Eventually, Null catches him and kills him. The instant ashswag dies, every single Mafia member stasis chamber activates and teleports them into the void. The entire faction dies in 1 second. Null hunters achieve instant total victory by exploiting the Mafia's single point of failure. Scenario 3. Farland's battle. The Mafia tries to invade the Farlands like they did in Season 1 when they destroyed the Farland civilization. But now Null Farland's patrols are there with the ability to light nether portals, which the Mafia can't do. Null controls the terrain advantage in their home territory. The Mafia's invisibility is less useful in the open Farlands terrain where Null patrols are specifically watching for intruders. Null systematically eliminates Mafia members who can't retreat effectively without their own nether portal access. Again, Null wins through terrain control and superior abilities. Remember when I told you to keep the totem teleport exploit in mind? Here's why it's absolutely decisive. The Mafia's entire power structure is built on fear and overwhelming numbers. They win by sending waves of invisible players until enemies give up. But that strategy only works against enemies who can actually be killed by normal combat. Null spawn squads literally cannot be killed by normal combat. You need arrow cannons, which requires specific knowledge and setup. The Mafia would be sending hundreds of thousands of members against enemies they can't kill, while those enemies drain their resources and pick them off one by one. It's not a fight, it's the Mafia slowly bleeding to death against an enemy they don't understand and can't counter. Here's the final piece of evidence that proves Null hunters win. The Mafia was destroyed in Season 1 by a small team exploiting their weakness. Spoke, manepear, and a Wemmbu distraction destroyed the stasis chambers and the entire faction collapsed immediately. The Null hunters are still active and hunting in Season 2. They survived having their leader 188 Axe killed and the squad just merged and kept going. The Mafia forced recruitment through prisons. Null earns fear through being literally unkillable. One faction was powerful but fundamentally flawed. The other faction is still operating because they don't have those same fatal weaknesses. The Invisible Mafia could only win through one specific scenario, which is by immediate overwhelming force where they sacrifice thousands of members to learn Null's patterns, somehow discover arrow cannons quickly and mass produce them, and keep ashswag protected in an obsidian vault while fighting a purely defensive war. But that scenario is unlikely, because ashswag is too arrogant to hide. The Mafia's invisibility makes coordination harder, and Null's totem pole stasis means they can always escape and try again later. The Mafia might have a 30% chance if everything goes perfectly for them, but realistically the Null Hunters win 7 out of 10 battles through pure game theories. The Null Hunters are simply the better faction, and the Invisible Mafia's reign of terror would end the moment these two forces went to war, and it's not even close. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments what video you want to see next. And if you want to see more Unstable SMP debates, check out the video on screen. Anyways, goodbye!